Tyler? Hello, babe? Oh no. Oh no. Shit. Babe! Oh no. Did you finish Punpun?
Yes.
Do you need some space?
Yeah.
Sorry, babe.
When I first embarked on my manga reading journey, which admittedly was not that long ago, I had the goal to try to find the manga that best represented what I was interested in with literature. And if you guys have seen my first video where I kind of go through the first 5 manga series that I've ever read, I started off on a path that was really weird. My first manga that I ever read was Mashle, a parody of a shonen battle manga series, which I had never read before, so I didn't fully understand the parody elements. I kind of continued, I read more stuff. Eventually, I read Berserk, which was heralded as the greatest manga series ever in terms of stories, in terms of art. The combination of the two made arguably the greatest piece of media within manga that's ever been created. And after finishing Berserk, honestly, I agreed. It was by far the best thing that I've ever read. Now, granted, it was only the 7th manga series that I've ever read, and my comparisons were Chainsaw Man, Jujutsu Kaisen, and like Demon Slayer. So after finishing and reading Berserk, I actually took like a couple weeks off from reading manga, because if I had read the pinnacle of manga, the thing that was the top of the top, I kind of wanted to reassess. I wanted to do some research. I wanted to find stories that most aligned with my interest in literature. And that, thanks to your guys' comments and the hours upon hours of videos and research that I watched, led me to one specific series, and that is Goodnight Punpun. I want to make 2 points here, one serious and one non-serious. The first one, the serious one, is that Goodnight Punpun, and I mean this sincerely, is the best thing that I've read in 2022 so far. I know I'm kind of spoiling the video, but I want to make this video talking about why I love this series. It is by far one of the best pieces of media I've ever engaged with. It is so touching and brutal and so transparent and effective in what it's going for that I was transfixed from moment 1, when the first introduction of Punpun began, to the end of the series. I could not put it down. It was an incredible journey to go on. The second point, the less serious point, do you guys just hate me? Like, I was reading my comments and you guys were like, oh, Vinland Saga and Berserk and Goodnight Punpun. Do you guys want me to like be sad or depressed all the time? This series right here is a truly sad series. I mean, what the fuck is wrong with you guys? Why are you so mean to me? I went out, by the way, and bought every single volume of this series because I immediately wanted to own it all because it was that damn good. Do you guys get this? You guys are breaking my bank account and making me sad at the same time. What is wrong with you? For those who don't know, though, what Goodnight Punpun is, it is a series published by Anio Asano. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly at all, but it ran from 2007 to 2008. It has about 147 chapters, and the editions that I read here is the Viz Media publication. It comes in 7 volumes, and each volume is $25, except for the last one because it is shorter, where it comes at $15. So, because of you guys, I went and spent $150. $165 when it's all said and done, plus taxes. So I probably spent close to $180 buying this entire manga series because I loved it that much. So the point of this video is I want to just talk about the stuff that I loved about Goodnight Punpun, why it connected with me, the elements that I liked. So if for some reason I don't get to what you loved the most about this story, one, I think that is really awesome that we can each get something else from a story. I will be engaging a lot in the comments on this video because I just want to talk about this series with people. I've been on the Reddit Oyasumi Punpun thing, just kind of looking at posts and commenting and just seeing what's up. So leave your comments down below, message me on Instagram, send me an email, your thoughts on this series so I can talk with people, I can engage, because goddamn was this awesome. What's going on, everybody? Tyler from the future here to let you know that this video is sponsored by Atlas VPN. If you've never heard of Atlas VPN before, they were developed by the top cybersecurity specialists and IT engineers in 2019 with the purpose to make the internet accessible and more secure for everybody. And currently, right now, they have over 6 million users worldwide. I think we can all agree that the internet can be a scary and unknown place, and Atlas VPN is more than just a VPN. It blocks all malicious links, ads, and trackers, and notifies you when someone is trying to steal your data. It stops ads and malware, guys. It makes the internet a safer place. It is also the best VPN deal on the market, where you can enjoy the most affordable online protection for just $1.99 per month with a 30-day money-back guaranteed. You can also, and this is my favorite part of the VPN, unlock your favorite content from all over the world. All you have to do is download this app, and it's available on Windows, Mac. It has on the App Store, the Google Play Store. It's available anywhere, and you just have to download an app, click a button, you can immediately change your location to anywhere in the world. When I'm traveling outside the US, I like to get the US version of Netflix back because they have some of my favorite movies and TV shows that I can't find anywhere else on Netflix. If you're looking for something on Google with Atlas VPN, you can search the web with real and organic search results and do it without tracking your activity. Among all other things, Atlas VPN is actually trying to save you money too. You can get the best deals while shopping online, including online subscriptions, Netflix, Spotify, airlines, hotels, everything. And the best part is Atlas VPN protects all of your devices with a single subscription. That's unlimited devices that you have with one subscription. Right now, Atlas VPN is running a huge discount. It means you can get a 3-year subscription for just $1.99 a month with a 30-day money-back guaranteed. And to get this amazing deal, all you have to do is click on the link in the description down below. It will be on the top of the description, but also a pinned comment in my videos as well. Again, that's a huge deal of a 3-year subscription for just $1.99 a month with a 30-day money-back guaranteed by just clicking the link in the description down below. I use Atlas VPN all the time when I'm watching Netflix. It's how I find a bunch of random movies and TV shows. Thank you to Atlas VPN for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to Past Tyler. My first impressions, and from what I gauge kind of talking with people on like Reddit and Twitter and stuff like this about this series, is that everybody's first impressions were kind of similar, and it was really along the lines of like, what the fuck is this? What am I reading? And I might be again in a very small camp where I did not know a single thing about the plot of Goodnight Punpun before I went into the actual series. But I did not know about the level of hell that this story would put me through. So my first impressions were really weird. I did not know this was a coming of age story. I did not understand at first why Punpun is a bird or a weird creature. And I did not understand why the author and creator Asano was kind of creating this really weird caricatures with the art where all the little kids in the story, the first volume I'm talking about here, were all like normal, but the adults were very like eccentric and they had weird mannerisms and actions, and I was like, what the hell is this? There were 2 main interactions early on in the first couple chapters or the first volume when I was reading where I was like, I don't know what this is or where this is going, but I'm kind of into it. And the first one is when Punpun's teacher, when he's an elementary school kid, freaks out about him not doing his homework, but then it turns out Punpun did, but the teacher has this weird reaction, and then a couple pages later, the principal and another teacher want to play a game of hide and seek. And when I was first reading this, I was like, what the fuck is this? Is this like a fantasy story? Like, I did not know what to expect because I had just got done with Berserk and Demon Slayer. I was in this like, oh, it's like fantasy mindset, not knowing that this was meant to be like a grounded and realistic story for the most part. But slowly over the course of the volume, I could kind of start seeing what this story was going for. I could see the fact that Punpun, in one of my favorite parts of the story, is this caricature of a bird. He's not human. And some of my favorite pieces of media take this storytelling element where they put realistic, severe human experiences on like non-human creatures. All you have to do is look at something like BoJack Horseman, which is tattooed on my leg. Or you could look at another show that's gaining a lot of popularity on the internet, and that's Smiling Friends, where you put these weird creatures that aren't real, like weird freaky things, but put them in the most human experiences, and it just accentuates the human elements of it.
It's just annoying because I admit that I probably screwed up. Wait, listen, wait. I'm talking. Just let me finish. Let me finish.
Go ahead.
I was saying.
And well, how does this tie back to Punpun? Well, I think the element of having Punpun be this character that you can project all of your experiences and feelings on helped me, and I think the goal of it is to help the readers connect with the plight that Punpun goes through. And I think that is ever more evident, by the way, I'm gonna have to spoil this series a little bit, I'm sorry about that, with the fact that this is a story about humanity, in humans, in feelings, in the universal feelings that we all experience with. And I think that is very evident with the fact that the story ends basically how the story begins. Another cycle, another journey that people are experiencing and that we're all unified and together. But with like the character elements of it and the eccentric and the very odd, freaky moments where Punpun is a kid. He doesn't really know how to process what's going on. He doesn't know how to understand the world around him yet. So he's seeing these moments with teachers where they are, I would say, like supposedly freaking out, and he's elevating it in his mind. He's like building it up bigger than it really was, because we tend to embellish these types of memories. We tend to embellish these types of stories. We've all had teachers that have quote unquote freaked out on us, but in the reality, they probably just raised their voice. But we embellish these stories, and maybe that's what the teacher is doing here. And the last point with those first impressions is that I did not expect this story to be so graphic in its content, because I did not know this would be a story spanning, I would say, probably around 20 years. The first major part of Punpun's life, from when he's a small boy as an elementary school student to a young man, a young adult, when he's in his early to, I would say, like mid-20s probably when the story ends. I was not expecting that. I was not ready for the sheer level of violence, both sexual and physical, that was going to occur over the course of the story. It was a far darker series than I was ever expecting, which honestly I think is its greatest strength, is not its expert character writing, but the fact that it can take all these human elements and then expand upon it. As the characters age, so does the content of the story. It's kind of like how Harry Potter, the first book's like a children's book, and then by the time that the characters are like late teens or like adults by that point, the content is more geared towards adults. It kind of escalates with this, but the beauty of it within all of this is that the violence and the adult content and the themes are sprinkled throughout in the first volume, whether we're looking at the relationship between Punpun and his mom, the abusive relationship that's there, or Punpun's mom and his father, that kind of abusive dynamic that's explored there that Punpun really doesn't fully understand, but as adults reading it, we can kind of take a step back and go, oh, he's in this kind of abusive family dynamic. So yeah, as you can see, I was very heavily impacted by the first volume of the series. After reading the first volume, I think I read it like fully in a couple hours. I immediately reread it again. I was so invested in this story already that my first impressions were just scattered, chaotic, but really, really intrigued. One of my favorite types of stories out there is the coming-of-age story, or a Bildungsroman, I think is how you say it. And those stories are my favorite because they always contain elements that feel so resonant with me. I mean, I just turned 24. I am still going through my own changes and journeys and growth that I don't recognize who I was like 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, shit, I look back to the decisions I was making a year ago, 6 months ago, and I go, oh, I was so stupid back then. And that's why I've always connected with coming-of-age stories so much, because I've always been in that section of my life, and it's not something that I think is ever gonna change. I always love stories where characters grow and realize and look back on who they were and they don't see themselves anymore, because that's what I experience on a day-to-day basis. I look back at yesterday and I'm like, oh, that Tyler of yesterday was an idiot, because I want to grow, I want to change. And with a series like Goodnight Punpun, it's taking those elements of a coming-of-age story. There are sections in the first volume of this book and then continuing on where the manga pulls back and we get this beautiful landscape shot that really cements this idea of childhood innocence, childhood wonder. And that continues and grows as the themes become more adult and the situations become more heavy and prominent with adult themes of violence and oppression and rage and anger, that those pullback shots, those larger shots, tend to reflect that as well. and I really, really loved that. This is a horrifically dark yet beautiful coming-of-age story, and it was arguably the darkest one I've ever read, but I want to get a little more into specifics about why I think this is a beautiful coming-of-age story, at least within the first volume. So we're introduced to Goodnight Punpun, and the first character that he really becomes connected with is this young girl who transfers into this class, Aiko, A-I-K-O, so if I'm butchering that, I'm really sorry. And he has this immediate attraction and connection to the girl, and slowly we see him at an elementary school age make friends and try to connect with this girl, and it all culminates in this journey at the end to this abandoned factory to find something, which I won't spoil, that ultimately sets them on different paths, and then we view those paths converge and divulge, and eventually by the end of the story they've split up completely, because that's usually what happens in life with your elementary school friends. But after that moment, after that kind of cliche punch where you get that pulled back landscape shot where it's always like the end credits roll on a coming of age movie, we're immediately drawn back into reality with the dynamic between Punpun's mom and Punpun's uncle, who came to move in as well, and we see their effects, their morals, their ideas, their upbringings, their stances on life have a deep emotional impact to Punpun. And when that camera steps back and the film ends and the credits roll, the real impact of the story starts being felt on Punpun. Because what's beautiful about this story is how each character connects with each character. But the issue with Punpun is he is so heavily influenced by those around her that the story ultimately becomes not one, in Punpun's eyes, of human connection, but depression and alienation and the lack of fate and purpose. Take all of these coming of age story elements and then add a surrealist element to it too, which I know that the author kind of disagrees with it being surreal, but there are moments where I was like, I don't understand what's going on. What is this? How is this working? What is this meant to represent? And after a couple weeks of having finished the story, and I still don't really understand it fully, and it's something that I'm gonna have to do more research probably into Japanese culture and actually dive in to the imagery of this story. It's something that's truly amazing that I just loved every single second with. In a sense, every single character in this story goes through some type of coming of age element to it where they grow and they're heavily impacted by the things that they do and the horrific decisions they make. A standout for me early in the story is Punpun's uncle, who we learn has this really odd and horrific and sad backstory, and he makes these decisions and actions that ultimately affect and alienate Punpun even further, as the words that he says has a long-lasting impact on Punpun that is felt throughout the course of the story. Then we have characters like Punpun's mom, who is even more impactful in how she berates and degrades Punpun and ultimately sets him up for a life of failure and alienation, because this story is a lot about characters failing and getting back up and failing again and continually failing until they die. And it's really morbid, but it's really, really insightful because each character motivation makes sense within the story. I think this is the perfect transition into this point of the story where I talk about the fact that Punpun is legitimately just a product of his environment. I mean, the Punpun that we see and the decisions that he makes is also heavily influenced by the failures of adults in Punpun's life, specifically his dad, who basically just straight up abandons him at a certain point, or it's Punpun's uncle who sets him on this path for questioning religion and fate and destiny and his stance and place in society, or it's his mom who makes him question his self-worth or his value on Earth, who makes him question why he's even born. What's the point of him being here? Punpun, as he traverses into being an adult, is constantly failed by adults in the world. Then we slowly start to kind of see that trickle away, but it's those early impacts when he's a young boy that is felt throughout the entire course of life. And this is ultimately what I want to talk about with my favorite part of the entire book, and it's the theme of adulthood, and specifically what it represents within the story, but also how it impacts the characters, because there's a whole collection of characters that I haven't even begun to talk about. I really want to focus mainly on Punpun because he is the main character of the story. But the theme of adulthood in this story is weird because it ultimately kind of centers around the fact that adulthood is just lies and it's empty, and the real world, the adult world, is vapid and shallow and pointless, and everybody's miserable and out for themselves, and everybody should just die. And you're like, God damn, that's really morbid, but that's what happens with Punpun. He has such a failure of a support system early on in the story, but by the time he enters adulthood, he sees the failures of society. He sees the gray areas, the dark areas, the horrific elements of it, and just rejects it entirely. He succumbs to it. He knows that this is the inevitability of it, which leads into his spiraling depression. The same goes with Punpun's uncle. The exact same element of it. Rejects society, fails, has to build back up. Or his mom, who does the same exact thing and then ultimately ends up dying. But where that theme is most prominent is with the character of Pegasus, and specifically the cult of good vibrations, which at a certain point in the story, I just fully stopped understanding what the fuck was going on with them and what this was for and what I was missing. But to me, what I got out of it before I got horribly confused, and when they all died at the end and like killed themselves, I was also like, what the fuck is this? This is wild, and I have to read it again because it's awesome. It's so interesting. But they are ultimately characters led by this leader named Pegasus, who, from my understanding, I think are meant to represent the rejection of adulthood, who still maintain that young childhood innocence, the belief in fate and destiny and things that can be controlled, and the fact that life has a point and can be something and you can do something meaningful. The exact contrast to Punpun at this point in his life is just something that I think is really, really telling about what the theme of this story is. And there are even points in this story where these kind of arcs kind of like converge, and there are these big long setups where our characters are in the same shot. The Pegasus ensemble, two of Punpun's friends that he doesn't even remember, and Punpun himself are all in one shot. And I think that's something that's really beautiful, because if the theme of this story is that adulthood is a lie, or that adulthood is a failure, or just failure as a whole, having all these different narratives converge with their own different approach to adulthood, I just think that's awesome. I think that's amazing. This is one of those videos where I don't think I've made a very good point on anything, or even have tried to make a point. I'm really just talking about stuff that has made an impact to me. So here's a quick couple things that really stood out to me that I really, really loved. The backgrounds on this manga, the drawings were beautiful and incredible, and there's a depth and a sense of life to them. Anytime there's a landscape shot or a beautiful backdrop, you can look in the background and there are little elements of life in every single frame, and every single little line or image or anything. One of my favorite interactions that I noticed in the background is Punpun's friend is getting a drink with another one of his friends, and you see a guy sit down in the bar, and then that guy looks away, and you don't really know what's going on, and he looks horrified, and he runs away, and two guys follow him. And then a couple pages later, you see that very guy who left that bar with the two people who were after him, and the guy has like a bloody nose. And it's never mentioned again. There's no direct point to it, at least I don't think. It's kind of just there in the background, being something that you can gravitate to, filling the scene with life and dynamics and everything about humanity, because this is ultimately, like I keep saying, a story about the human experience. The drawing, incredible. The writing, amazing. Downright incredible. Impactful. God? Punpun's understanding of God, I don't really understand, but it's really, really cool, really, really interesting, as like this internal manifestation of insecurity in Punpun's eyes. I think is great. Any of the abstract meta drawings, or like moments in which Punpun kind of ascends and it becomes very surreal, I think is really beautiful. I didn't even talk about the character of Aiko, A-I-K-O again, I'm really butchering that, who in their journey together, her and Punpun ultimately diverged so impactfully, because Aiko grew up in a household where her mom was in a cult. She abused, she hurt, she manipulated Aiko, and ultimately that leads to her escaping finally in a moment with Punpun where her and Punpun end up killing her mom in this truly horrific panel where Punpun is strangling her mom, and you just see the horror happening, and then Punpun leaves and there's this big impact with him. But then Aiko, you see her stab the body, and it turns out Aiko actually killed her and Punpun didn't choke her out. But then they eventually escape and they try to live their lives, and they try to get around with Punpun being this strength, this person to guide along Aiko, but he ultimately becomes this abuser himself, and he becomes this person who is a shell of his former self. And we see Aiko just want normalcy. She just wants a normal life, and Punpun can't recognize that and can't give that to her. And it's truly, truly heartbreaking, which leads to a moment that is so sad in reflection of it. That is just a life that has lost in tragedy. And spoiler alert, Aiko ends up killing herself. And it is a truly heartbreaking moment when Punpun is carrying her corpse around, not fully accepting what has happened to Aiko and to his life. And it's in these little moments that we see like the true humanity of the story come through. And I haven't even talked about a lot of the side characters, the group that Punpun forms around him that we ultimately see at the end. The fact that Punpun, despite his willingness and readiness to die, doesn't and lives despite the struggles and the failures, and lives not really amounting to much, and that's okay. The story could have ended on a very somber note that I think a lot of people wanted something like BoJack Horseman to happen, where BoJack Horseman at the end kills himself, or people wanted that to happen, or it seemed to be expected, but that's not what the story is about. And frankly, that's not what Goodnight Punpun is about at all to me. It's a truly, truly magnificent story that I still haven't touched on everything. And I'm sorry that I couldn't get to everything, I really am, but yeah, I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about. I'm sorry the video was so rambly. I sat down, I had some notes, and I just wanted to talk about things that meant something to me. So you're probably wondering, well, Tyler, when's the next manga video? Well, this is what I want you guys to do. In the comment section down below, if you've gotten to this long in the video, because this is going to be a long video, just give me some manga recommendations. I'm going to go through, I'm going to pick the 3 most popular ones outside of One Piece, because I'm not reading 1,000 chapters right now, and I will make a video on those 3 manga that I read. That will be the next manga video. So if you recommend me like 20th Century Boys, and then a couple other stuff, I'm going to read 20th Century Boys at some point. I will read those, and that will be the next manga video. And I will read your manga recommendations, and hopefully you don't recommend too much weird shit to me, because that would be very cruel. You guys have already made me suffer enough, and I hate you for that. So yeah, that brings us to the end of this really weird, very ranty, very rambly, out of order video, where I just talk about something that made an impact on me, and that's Goodnight Punpun. Thank you to Atlas VPN for sponsoring this video. Everything you need to know will be in the description down below. I also want to say that I do have a Patreon that leads to a Discord where we can kind of talk about books and manga and everything. There's like almost 200 people in there. That's really cool. So I'm in there chatting and talking about stuff. So if you want to go join that, go click on the link in the description down below with the Patreon. If you haven't already, go check out my friend Matt's Bookshelf, who makes really great booktube content, as well as Drunzo, who also makes really great booktube content. And yeah, this brings us to the end of this video. I'm going to take a very long nap and reflect on this series, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you again soon.